I think I didn't do anything wrong, just went along with something harmless. So why is there a process server at my door handing me divorce papers? All I did was let my ex walk me down the aisle, for fun, at my own wedding. But apparently, my husband saw it differently. Now, everyone is acting like I'm a monster, and my entire life is falling apart. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. Standing in my empty living room, staring at the divorce papers scattered across my coffee table, I can't help but replay that day 6 months ago, my wedding day, the day that was supposed to be perfect, the day that apparently started this whole mess. I remember feeling so beautiful in my ivory dress, the way the silk flowed around me as I prepared for my walk down the aisle. Tom looked so handsome waiting at the altar, his dark hair perfectly styled, that nervous smile playing on his lips. Everything was exactly as I'd dreamed it would be. Then Micah showed up. My father David was supposed to walk me down the aisle, but he'd had too much champagne during the pre-ceremony photos and was looking a little green around the gills. That's when Micah appeared at my side, looking devastatingly handsome in his black suit. "Hey there, beautiful bride," he said with that crooked smile that used to make my heart skip a beat. "Your dad's taking a breather. How about I do the honors?" I should have said no. I can see that now, sitting here with legal documents that will dissolve my marriage. But in that moment, with the wedding march playing and everyone waiting, it seemed like such a harmless little adventure. "Oh my God, yes," I laughed, grabbing his arm. "This will be hilarious." My best friend Lila was already pulling out her phone to record it. "This is going to be so funny," she whispered excitedly. As we started walking down the aisle, I could see the confusion rippling through the crowd. Tom's mother Marjorie looked absolutely scandalized, her mouth hanging open in shock. Some of the older relatives were whispering behind their hands, but I just smiled bigger and held on to Micah's arm tighter. "You look incredible," Micah murmured as we walked. "Tom's a lucky man." "Don't I know it?" I replied, feeling giddy with the attention and the spontaneity of it all. When we reached the altar, I expected Micah to just hand me off to Tom and disappear into the crowd. Instead, he kissed my hand and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Take good care of her, Tom. She's one of a kind." I giggled at the theatrical gesture, but when I looked at Tom, his smile seemed forced. His jaw was tight, and there was something in his eyes I couldn't quite read. "Thanks, man," Tom said stiffly, taking my hand from Micah's. The ceremony proceeded normally after that, but I kept catching Tom glancing toward where Micah had taken a seat in the third row. During our vows, when I was supposed to be looking into my husband's eyes, I found myself sneaking peeks at the crowd, basking in the whispered conversations and shocked expressions. At the reception, people kept coming up to me about it. "That was certainly unexpected," said Tom's Aunt Patricia, her voice dripping with disapproval. "I thought it was sweet," my cousin Rebecca countered, "very modern and progressive." But it was Marjorie's reaction that should have been my first warning. She cornered me by the dessert table, her face flushed with anger. "Evadne, what were you thinking?" she hissed. "Having your ex-boyfriend walk you down the aisle, at your wedding to my son?" "Oh, Marjorie, relax," I said, waving my hand dismissively. "It was just for fun. David wasn't feeling well, and Micah offered to help. It's not like it means anything." "It means something to Tom," she said sharply. "I can see it in his face." "Tom's fine," I insisted. "He knows it was just a silly moment. You're making a big deal out of nothing." But when I looked across the room at my new husband, he was standing alone by the bar, staring down at his drink with the expression I'd never seen before. When our eyes met, he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The next morning, as we were having breakfast before leaving for our honeymoon, Tom finally brought it up. "Evadne, about yesterday, with Micah walking you down the aisle." "What about it?" I asked, not looking up from my phone where I was scrolling through all the wedding photos Lila had posted on social media. It caught me off guard. I wish you'd asked me first. I finally looked up at him, genuinely surprised by his tone. Asked you? Tom, it was a spur-of-the-moment thing. My dad was sick, Micah offered to help, and I thought it would be fun. Why would I need permission for that? It's not about permission, Tom said carefully. It's about, well, he's your ex-boyfriend, Evadne. Having him walk you down the aisle at our wedding sends a certain message. What message? I laughed. That I have friends who care enough to help when needed. Tom, you're being way too sensitive about this. He was quiet for a long moment, just staring at his coffee. Maybe you're right, he said finally. I guess I just didn't expect it. Exactly, I said, reaching over to pat his hand. You're overthinking it. It was just a fun little moment that made our wedding unique. People will talk about it for years. And they did talk about it. Oh, how they talked. 3 months after the wedding, I was settling into married life with Tom and his 8-year-old daughter Sophie from his first marriage. We'd bought a beautiful house in the suburbs, and I'd started a new job as an office manager at a marketing firm downtown. That's where everything started to get complicated. I was at my desk one Tuesday morning when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hey, beautiful bride, it's Micah. Got your number from Lila. Hope married life is treating you well. I stared at the message for a full minute before responding. I should have deleted it. I should have blocked the number. Instead, I found myself typing back. Micah, what a surprise. Married life is good. How did you get this number? I have my ways. Listen, I'm in town for a few weeks on business. Would love to catch up over coffee sometime. My heart started racing in a way it hadn't since before the wedding. There was something thrilling about hearing from him, something that made me feel alive in a way I'd forgotten I could feel. I don't know if that's such a good idea, I typed, then immediately deleted it. Instead, I sent, coffee sounds nice. When were you thinking? We made plans to meet that Friday at a little cafe near my office. I told myself it was perfectly innocent, just two old friends catching up. But I spent an hour that morning choosing my outfit, settling on a blue dress that I knew brought out my eyes. Micah was already waiting when I arrived, looking as handsome as ever in a grey suit that fit him perfectly. Evadne, he said, standing to kiss my cheek, you look amazing. Marriage agrees with you. Thank you, I said, feeling my cheeks flush. You look pretty good yourself. We talked for 2 hours. He told me about his job in sales, traveling all over the country, staying in nice hotels, meeting interesting people. His life sounded so exciting compared to my routine of work, home, dinner, bedtime. Don't get me wrong, I found myself saying. I love Tom and Sophie. But sometimes I feel like I'm just existing, you know? Going through the motions of being a wife and stepmother. That doesn't sound like the Evadne I remember, Micah said, leaning forward with that intense look he used to give me. You were always so full of life, so spontaneous. Remember that weekend we drove to the coast without telling anyone? I did remember. I remembered the thrill of it, the freedom, the feeling that anything could happen. That was a long time ago, I said softly. Doesn't have to be, he replied, his hand moving closer to mine on the table. I should have pulled away. Instead, I let him brush his fingers against mine. I should go, I said, but I didn't move. Should you? He asked. Or do you want to stay and remember what it feels like to be spontaneous? I stayed for another hour. When I finally got back to the office, I was floating on cloud 9. I felt beautiful and desired and alive in a way I hadn't in months. But when I got home that evening, reality crashed back down. How was your day? Tom asked, looking up from where he was helping Sophie with her homework at the kitchen table. Fine, I said quickly, just the usual office stuff. Mummy Evadne, will you help me with my math? Sophie asked, holding up her worksheet. Maybe later, sweetheart. I need to check some emails. I retreated to the bedroom and immediately pulled out my phone. There was already a text from Micah. Had such a great time today. You're even more beautiful than I remembered. When can I see you again? I typed and deleted a dozen responses before settling on, I had a nice time too, but we should probably keep this between us. Tom wouldn't understand. Of course, our little secret. That night at dinner, Tom tried to tell me about his day at the software company where he worked, but I found myself distracted, thinking about Micah's smile and the way he'd looked at me. Evadne, did you hear what I said? Tom's voice broke through my thoughts. Sorry, what? I said my mum wants to have us over for dinner this weekend. She's been wanting to see how we're settling into the house. Oh, sure. Whatever you want. Tom gave me a strange look. Are you feeling okay? You seem distant. I'm fine, I said, forcing a smile. Just tired from work. But I wasn't fine. Over the next few weeks, Micah and I started texting regularly. At first, it was just friendly conversation, but gradually it became more flirtatious. He'd send me pictures of the cities he was visiting, and I'd send him photos of my outfits before work. Wish I could see that dress in person, he'd text. Maybe someday, I'd respond, my heart pounding as I hit send. We met for coffee 3 more times over the next month. Each time, we sat a little closer, talked a little more intimately, stayed a little longer. I started looking forward to his texts, more than I looked forward to coming home to Tom and Sophie. At home, I became increasingly irritable and distracted. When Tom asked about my late nights at the office, which were actually extended coffee dates with Micah, I snapped at him. I'm working hard to build my career, Tom. I thought you'd be supportive of that. I am supportive, he said calmly. I just miss spending time with you. Sophie misses you too. I'm doing my best, I said, feeling defensive. I can't be everything to everyone. One evening, Sophie came into the living room where I was texting Micah and climbed onto the couch beside me. Mommy, Evadne, why are you always on your phone now? She asked in that direct way children have. I'm not always on my phone, I said, quickly closing the messaging app. You are, though, she said matter-of-factly. Daddy says you're probably just busy with work, but you look happy when you look at your phone. You don't look happy when you look at us. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, but instead of taking them as the wake-up call they should have been, I felt annoyed. Sophie, that's not true. I love you and your daddy very much. Then why don't you smile at us the way you smile at your phone? I didn't have an answer for that. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Tom approached me again. Evadne, I've been thinking about what Sophie said earlier, and I have to ask, is everything okay with us? You've seemed so distant lately. Everything's fine, Tom. You're both just being overly sensitive. I'm adjusting to a new job and a new life. That takes time. I know, but nothing, I interrupted. I'm doing my best here, and instead of being understanding, you're making me feel guilty for working hard and trying to build something for our future. Tom looked hurt, but he didn't push further. You're right, I'm sorry. I just want us to be happy. We are happy, I insisted, even as my phone buzzed with another text from Micah that I was dying to read. But we weren't happy, and deep down, I knew it. I was choosing the excitement of my secret relationship with Micah over the stability and love that Tom and Sophie offered. I was choosing the thrill of the forbidden over the comfort of home. I just didn't realize how much that choice was going to cost me. The breaking point came at Marjorie's birthday dinner 6 weeks later. Tom had reserved a table at an upscale downtown bistro, and the whole family was there. Marjorie, my father David, my brother Evan, Leela, and several other relatives. I'd been texting with Micah all day. He was in town again, and we'd made plans to meet for drinks after the family dinner. I was practically buzzing with anticipation, counting down the minutes until I could escape the stuffy family gathering and feel alive again. So, Evadne, Marjorie said as we waited for our appetizers, how are you enjoying married life? You seem different lately. There was something in her tone that put me immediately on the defensive. Different how? Just distant. Tom mentioned you've been working a lot of late nights. I felt Tom's eyes on me and forced a bright smile. I'm building my career, Marjorie. Some of us have to work hard to get ahead. Of course, dear. I just hope you're not neglecting your family in the process. The implication in her words made my blood boil. Who was she to judge how I managed my marriage? I think I know how to balance my priorities, I said coolly. I'm sure you do, she replied, but her tone suggested otherwise. That's when I made the mistake that would haunt me for months to come. Maybe it was the wine, or maybe it was my frustration at being judged, but I decided to tell them all about my harmless friendship with Micah. Actually, since we're talking about balance, I said, my voice getting louder, I think it's healthy for married people to maintain friendships outside their marriage. Take my friend Micah, for example. I saw Tom's fork pause halfway to his mouth, but I was on a roll now. You all remember Micah from the wedding, right? The one who stepped in to walk me down the aisle when Dad wasn't feeling well. I looked pointedly at David, who had the grace to look embarrassed. Well, we've been catching up over coffee lately, and it's been so refreshing to talk to someone who really understands me. The table had gone completely silent. Lila was staring at me with wide eyes, and Evan was looking down at his plate like he wanted to disappear. Evadne, Tom said quietly, maybe we shouldn't... Shouldn't what? I interrupted, feeling reckless and defiant. Shouldn't talk about the fact that I have a friend who actually appreciates my company. Someone who thinks I'm interesting and funny and worth spending time with. Evadne, stop, Tom said, his voice strained. But I couldn't stop. The words kept pouring out of me like poison. You know what Micah said to me yesterday? He said I seemed too vibrant and full of life to be stuck in such a conventional situation. He said I'm the kind of woman who needs adventure and excitement, not just routine and responsibility. Marjorie's face had gone pale. You're discussing your marriage with your ex-boyfriend? I'm discussing my life with a friend who cares about my happiness, I shot back, which is more than I can say for some people at this table. Evadne, that's enough, David said sharply, but I was beyond caring. Is it, Dad? Is it enough that I'm supposed to just smile and nod and be grateful for a life that's slowly suffocating me? Micah sees who I really am. He remembers the woman I used to be before I got trapped in this suburban housewife role. Tom stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I need some air, he said, and walked out of the restaurant. The silence that followed was deafening. Well, Marjorie said finally, her voice shaking with anger, I think we all know where your priorities lie. She gathered her purse and followed Tom outside, leaving me sitting there with the rest of the family staring at me in shock. Evadne, Evan said quietly. What the hell was that? That was me being honest for once, I said, but even as I said it, I could feel the wine-fueled confidence starting to fade. Honest? Lila said incredulously. That was you humiliating your husband in front of his family. I didn't humiliate anyone, I just stated some facts. The fact that you're having an emotional affair with your ex-boyfriend? Evan asked bluntly. It's not an affair, I protested. We're just friends. Friends don't talk about each other the way you just talked about Micah, David said, looking disappointed. And wives don't embarrass their husbands like that in public. I looked around the table at their faces, disappointed, angry, shocked, and suddenly felt very alone. I think I should go, I said, standing up. Yeah, Evan said quietly. I think you should. I grabbed my purse and walked out of the restaurant, my heels clicking on the tile floor. Outside, I could see Tom and Marjorie talking by his car. When Tom saw me, he said something to his mother and walked over. Get in the car, Evadne, he said quietly. We're going home. The drive home was the longest 20 minutes of my life. Tom didn't say a single word, just stared straight ahead at the road while I sat in the passenger seat, finally starting to realize the magnitude of what I'd done. When we got home, Sophie was in the living room with the babysitter, watching a movie. How was dinner? She asked brightly. Fine, sweetheart, Tom said, forcing a smile. Why don't you get ready for bed? I'll be up to say goodnight in a few minutes. After Sophie went upstairs and the babysitter left, Tom finally turned to face me. I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth, he said. Are you having an affair with Micah? No, I said quickly. Tom, I swear, we're just friends. We've had coffee a few times, that's all. Coffee, he repeated flatly. Yes, just coffee. I know how it sounded tonight, but I was frustrated with your mother's comments, and I said things I shouldn't have said. Tom studied my face for a long moment. Evadne, do you want to be married to me? The question caught me off guard. Of course I do. Why would you ask that? Because tonight, in front of my family, you made it sound like being married to me is a prison sentence. You talked about another man like he was your salvation. I didn't mean it like that, I said, but even as I said it, I wasn't sure it was true. Then how did you mean it? I didn't have an answer for that. Tom nodded slowly, like I'd confirmed something he'd already suspected. I'm going to bed, he said. We'll talk more tomorrow. But as I watched him walk upstairs, I had a sinking feeling that tomorrow might be too late. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the evening over and over in my mind. I kept reaching for my phone to text Micah, to find some comfort in his words, but something held me back. For the first time in months, I tried to see the situation from Tom's perspective. How would I feel if he'd talked about another woman, the way I'd talked about Micah, if he'd made our marriage sound like a burden in front of my family? But even as I tried to feel guilty, part of me was still angry. Angry at Tom for not understanding, angry at Marjorie for judging me, angry at everyone for making me feel like the villain when all I'd done was be honest about my feelings. I didn't know it then, but Tom wasn't sleeping either. While I was lying there justifying my actions, he was in his home office, making notes on a legal pad and researching divorce attorneys online. The war I'd started that night at dinner was just beginning. The next few weeks were like living in a house made of eggshells. Tom was polite but distant, speaking to me only when necessary, and spending most of his free time either at work or in his home office with the door closed. Sophie, sensitive to the tension, started acting out at school and clinging to Tom whenever he was around. I told myself that Tom was overreacting, that he'd eventually calm down and we'd work through this rough patch. In the meantime, I threw myself deeper into my relationship with Micah. He's being ridiculous, I complained to Micah over coffee one afternoon. All this drama over a few innocent conversations. Some men are just insecure, Micah said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. They can't handle their women having male friends. Exactly, I said, feeling validated. You understand me in a way he never has. I've always understood you, Evadne. That's why we were so good together. His words sent a thrill through me, even as a small voice in my head warned me that this conversation was crossing a line. We were good together, weren't we? I said softly. We were perfect together, he replied, his thumb stroking across my knuckles. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we'd never broken up. Micah, I know, you're married now, but that doesn't mean we can't be close friends, right? I nodded, even though everything about the way he was looking at me, the way he was touching my hand, the way my heart was racing, had nothing to do with friendship. That evening, I came home to find Tom in the kitchen, making dinner, while Sophie sat at the counter doing homework. How was work? He asked without looking up from the stove. Fine, I said, the same answer I'd been giving for weeks. Any late meetings tonight? There was something in his tone that made me look at him more carefully. No, why? Just wondering. You've had a lot of late meetings lately. I told you I'm working hard to establish myself at the company. Tom nodded, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. Later that night, after Sophie was in bed, Tom knocked on the bedroom door where I was getting ready for bed. Evadne, we need to talk. About what? About us, about where we're going. I sat down on the edge of the bed, suddenly nervous. What do you mean? I mean that we're living like strangers. We barely talk, we don't spend time together, and when we do interact, it feels forced. That's not my fault, I said defensively. You're the one who's been cold and distant since your mother's birthday dinner. I've been distant. Tom's voice rose slightly. Evadne, you humiliated me in front of my family. You talked about another man like he was the love of your life while I sat right there. That's not what happened. Then what did happen? Because from where I was sitting, it sounded like you were telling everyone how much happier you are with your ex-boyfriend than you are with your husband. I was frustrated. Your mother was being judgmental, and I said things I didn't mean. Did you not mean them? Because it sure sounded like you meant every word. I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come, because the truth was, I had meant some of it. I was happier when I was with Micah. I did feel more alive, more like myself. Tom saw the hesitation in my face and nodded grimly. That's what I thought. Tom, I love you, I said desperately. I chose to marry you. Did you? Or did you just choose the security I could offer? The question hung in the air between us like a challenge. That's not fair, I said finally. Isn't it? Tell me honestly, Evadne. If Micah asked you to leave with him tomorrow, what would you say? That's a hypothetical question. He's not asking me to leave. But if he did, I couldn't answer, and my silence was answer enough. Tom stood up, his face pale but determined. I think we both know where this is heading. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm not going to sit around and wait for you to decide whether you want to be married to me or not. It means I'm going to start making some decisions of my own. He left the room, and I heard him go downstairs to his office. I wanted to follow him, to try to fix things, but I didn't know how. And if I was being honest with myself, I wasn't sure I wanted to fix them. The next morning, I woke up to find Tom's side of the bed empty. When I went downstairs, Sophie was eating cereal at the kitchen table. Where's your dad? I asked. He left early for work, she said without looking up. He said to tell you he'd be working late tonight. I felt a stab of something, guilt, maybe, or fear, but I pushed it aside. That afternoon, Lila called me at work. Evadne, we need to talk, she said without preamble. About what? About what happened at dinner the other night, and about these coffee dates you've been having with Micah. What about them? People are talking, Evadne. Marjorie called my mom, and my mom called me. Everyone's worried about you. Worried about what? About the fact that you're having an affair. I'm not having an affair, I said automatically, but the words felt hollow. Maybe not physically, but emotionally. Come on, Evadne. I've seen the way you light up when you talk about him. I've seen how distracted you've been. This isn't just friendship. Even if that were true, which it's not, it's none of anyone else's business. It's Tom's business, and Sophie's. They're your family, Evadne. I know who my family is. Do you? Because from the outside, it looks like you're choosing Micah over them. I'm not choosing anyone over anyone. Why can't I have both? Lila was quiet for a long moment. Because that's not how marriage works, Evadne. You can't have a husband and a boyfriend and expect everyone to be okay with it. He's not my boyfriend. Then what is he? I didn't have an answer for that either. That evening, I came home to find Tom packing a suitcase in our bedroom. What are you doing? I asked, though the answer was obvious. I'm going to stay at my mum's for a while, he said without looking at me. Tom, that's not necessary. We can work this out. Can we? Because I've been trying to work it out for weeks, and you've been more interested in your coffee dates than in saving our marriage. That's not true. Tom finally looked at me, and I was shocked by the pain in his eyes. Evadne, I found the phone records. My blood went cold. What phone records? Our cell phone bill. Hundreds of texts to the same number over the past 2 months. I called the number. Micah answered. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Tom, I can explain. Explain what? That you've been lying to me for months. That while I've been trying to figure out how to save our marriage, You've been carrying on a relationship with your ex-boyfriend. It's not a relationship, we're just friends. Friends don't send each other good morning and good night texts every day. Friends don't have secret coffee dates. Friends don't talk about each other the way you talked about him at dinner. I wanted to deny it, but the evidence was right there in black and white. Where does this leave us? I asked quietly. Tom zipped up his suitcase and picked it up. I don't know. I need some time to think. What about Sophie? Sophie will stay with me. I don't think this house is a very stable environment for her right now. You can't take her away from me. I'm not taking her away. I'm protecting her from the chaos you've created. He walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back to me. For what it's worth, Evadne, I really did love you. I thought we could build something good together, but I won't compete with a ghost from your past. After he left, I sat in our empty house and finally allowed myself to cry. But even as the tears fell, I was reaching for my phone to text Micah. Tom left, I typed. I need to see you. His response came immediately. On my way. And just like that, I made the choice that would cost me everything. For 3 weeks, I lived in a fantasy. With Tom and Sophie gone, I was free to see Micah whenever I wanted. He practically moved into my house, and for a brief, intoxicating period, I felt like I was living the life I was meant to live. Micah made me feel beautiful and desired. He told me I was too good for Tom, too vibrant and exciting for suburban married life. He took me to expensive restaurants and trendy bars, places where I felt sophisticated and worldly. You're glowing, he said one evening, as we sat in a rooftop bar overlooking the city. This is the real Evadne, the woman I fell in love with years ago. I feel like myself again, I admitted, leaning into his embrace. You should never have married him, Micah said, stroking my hair. You're not meant for that conventional life. You're meant for adventure, for passion, for more than what he could give you. His words were like a drug, validating every choice I'd made, every boundary I'd crossed. But the fantasy came crashing down on a Tuesday morning when I was getting ready for work. The doorbell rang at 7:30 a.m., which was unusual. When I opened the door, a stern-looking man in a grey suit was standing on my porch with a manila envelope in his hand. Evadne Harrow? He asked. Yes. You've been served, he said, handing me the envelope. Have a good day, ma'am. I stood in my doorway, staring at the envelope in my hands, my heart pounding. With shaking fingers, I tore it open and pulled out the papers inside. Petition for dissolution of marriage was printed across the top in bold letters. I sank down onto my couch and read through the documents with growing horror. Tom wasn't just asking for a divorce. He was asking for primary custody of Sophie, claiming that I was an unfit stepmother due to my extramarital relationship and abandonment of parental responsibilities. Attached to the petition was a thick stack of evidence that made my blood run cold. Phone records showing hundreds of texts between Micah and me. Bank statements showing charges at restaurants and bars during times when I'd told Tom I was working late. Even screenshots of social media posts that Lila had shared from our coffee dates, posts I didn't even know existed. But the worst part was Tom's affidavit, written in his careful, methodical handwriting. Throughout our marriage, my wife has shown a pattern of deceptive behavior and emotional infidelity. She has prioritized her relationship with her former boyfriend over her responsibilities to our family. She has lied repeatedly about her whereabouts and activities. Most concerning is her lack of interest in her role as a stepmother to my daughter, Sophie, who has begun exhibiting behavioral problems at school as a direct result of the instability in our home. I tried calling Tom immediately, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I tried calling Marjorie, but she hung up as soon as she heard my voice. Even Lila wasn't answering her phone. Panicked, I called Micah. Tom served me with divorce papers, I said as soon as he answered. There was a pause. Wow, that's intense. Intense? That's all you have to say. Micah, He's trying to take Sophie away from me. He's making me sound like some kind of monster. Hey, calm down. This is probably just a negotiating tactic. Lawyers always ask for more than they expect to get. You don't understand. He has evidence. Phone records, bank statements, everything. Another pause. Evidence of what? We haven't done anything wrong. Haven't we? I asked, suddenly seeing our relationship clearly for the first time in months. Micah, we've been having an affair. Maybe not physically, but emotionally. Absolutely. Evadne, you're being dramatic. So what if we're close? So what if we enjoy each other's company? That doesn't make you a bad person. But it did make me a bad wife. And a bad stepmother. And as I sat there reading through Tom's carefully documented case against me, I realized that he had been paying attention all along. While I thought I was being clever and discreet, he had been quietly building a case that painted me as exactly what I was, a woman who had chosen her own selfish desires over her family's well-being. That afternoon, I called in sick to work and drove to a lawyer's office downtown. The attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Wells, listened to my story with a neutral expression. Mrs. Harrow, she said when I finished, I'm going to be very direct with you. Based on what you've told me and what I can see in these documents, your husband has a very strong case. But I never physically cheated, I protested. Physical infidelity isn't the only grounds for divorce in this state. Emotional infidelity, abandonment of marital duties, behavior that's detrimental to the family unit, all of these are valid grounds. What about Sophie? He can't just take her away from me. Sophie isn't your biological daughter, correct? No, but I've been her stepmother for almost a year. Mrs. Harrow, you have no legal rights to Sophie. Her father has full discretion over custody arrangements. The fact that he's documented your absence from the home and your lack of involvement in her care doesn't help your case. I felt like the walls were closing in around me. So, what do I do? You can contest the divorce, but frankly, I'd advise against it. The evidence against you is substantial, and a contested divorce will only cost you more money and likely result in the same outcome. Your best bet is to negotiate the terms of the settlement and try to minimize the financial damage. Financial damage? Mrs. Harrow, you've been married less than a year. You're not entitled to alimony, and since the marital assets are minimal and the breakdown of the marriage is largely attributable to your conduct, you're not likely to receive much in the way of property division. I walked out of that office in a daze. In the span of a few hours, I'd gone from feeling like I was living my best life to realizing that I was about to lose everything. That evening, Micah came over as usual, but for the first time, his presence didn't comfort me. I talked to a lawyer today, I told him. She says Tom has a strong case. So you'll fight it, he said, pouring himself a glass of wine from Tom's expensive collection. With what? He has documentation of everything, Micah. Every lie I told, every time I chose you over my family, every moment I prioritized my own happiness over my responsibilities. You deserve to be happy, Evadne. Do I? At what cost? I've lost my husband, my stepdaughter, probably half my family. And for what? Micah set down his wine glass and looked at me seriously. For us. For what we have together. What do we have together, Micah? Really? He was quiet for a moment. We have a connection. We have chemistry. We have history. That's not a relationship. That's not a future. That's just nostalgia and excitement. It could be more, he said, but even he didn't sound convinced. Could it? Because you've never once talked about a future together. You've never mentioned leaving your job, or settling down, or building something real. You just talk about adventure and passion and living in the moment. There's nothing wrong with living in the moment. There is when the moment costs you everything else. That night, after Micah left, I sat in my empty house and finally forced myself to confront the truth. I had destroyed my marriage for a fantasy. I had chosen the thrill of an affair over the stability of a real relationship. I had prioritized my own selfish desires over the needs of a little girl who had started to see me as a mother figure. And now I was going to pay the price. The divorce proceedings moved quickly. Tom's lawyer was efficient and thorough, presenting a case that painted me as a selfish, unfaithful wife who had abandoned her family responsibilities for an extramarital affair. I tried to fight some of the characterizations, but the evidence was overwhelming. Text messages where I complained about feeling trapped in married life. Bank records showing expensive dinners during times when I'd claimed to be working late. Even testimony from Sophie's teacher about her declining performance and behavioral issues at school. The final hearing was held on a grey December morning, exactly 8 months after my wedding day. I sat at the defendant's table with my lawyer, watching as Tom presented his case with calm, methodical precision. "Your Honor," Tom's attorney said, "my client entered into this marriage in good faith, believing that he and the defendant would build a life together centered around family and mutual respect. Instead, he discovered that the defendant was more interested in pursuing a relationship with her former boyfriend than in honoring her marriage vows. I wanted to object, to explain that it hadn't started out that way, that I had tried to be a good wife, but the evidence spoke louder than any explanation I could offer. When it was my turn to testify, I tried to present myself as a woman who had made mistakes but was willing to work on the marriage. Your Honor, I admit that I made some poor choices. I developed a friendship with my ex-boyfriend that became inappropriate, and I wasn't always honest with my husband about the nature of that relationship, but I never physically cheated, and I believe that with counseling, we could work through these issues." Tom's lawyer was ready for this argument. "Mrs. Harrow, is it true that when your husband moved out of the marital home, you immediately began cohabiting with the man you claim was just a friend?" I felt my face flush. "He didn't move in, he just visited frequently. Visited frequently enough that neighbors reported seeing his car in your driveway overnight on multiple occasions." Yes, but... "And is it true that during the 3 weeks your husband and stepdaughter were out of the home, you made no attempt to contact Sophie or maintain your relationship with her?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Because it was true. In my fantasy world with Micah, I had completely forgotten about Sophie. I hadn't called to check on her, hadn't asked about school, hadn't even wondered how she was handling her father's absence from the home. I was dealing with a lot of stress," I said weakly. "Too much stress to call an 8-year-old child who had come to see you as a mother figure?" I had no answer for that. The judge, an older woman with kind but stern eyes, listened to all the testimony before delivering her verdict. "This is a case about priorities and responsibilities," she said. "Marriage is a commitment that requires both parties to prioritize the well-being of the family unit over individual desires. The evidence clearly shows that the defendant chose to prioritize an extramarital relationship over her duties as a wife and stepmother. She granted Tom the divorce on grounds of adultery and emotional abandonment. He received the house, primary custody of Sophie, and the majority of our shared assets. I was ordered to pay a portion of his legal fees and was granted only supervised visitation with Sophie, if Tom chose to allow it. As the judge read the final decree, I looked across the courtroom at my family. Tom sat with Marjorie and my brother Evan, all of them looking relieved. My father sat alone on my side of the courtroom, looking disappointed and ashamed. Lila was nowhere to be seen. After the hearing, I approached Tom in the hallway. "Tom, please, can we talk about Sophie? She's been in my life for almost a year. I do love her." Tom looked at me with eyes that held no warmth, no forgiveness, and no hope. "Evadne, you had 3 weeks to show that you cared about Sophie's well-being. Instead, you used that time to play house with your boyfriend. You made your choice." "I made a mistake. I can do better." "You had your chance to do better. You chose not to take it." He walked away, and I knew that was the last real conversation we would ever have. Outside the courthouse, I found Micah waiting by my car. I had called him that morning, asking him to be there for support, but seeing him now, I felt nothing but emptiness. "How did it go?" he asked. "I lost everything," I said flatly. "Hey, that's not true. You still have me. We can finally be together without any secrets, without any guilt." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw him clearly for the first time. He was handsome and charming and exciting, but he was also shallow and selfish and completely incapable of understanding what I had sacrificed for our relationship. "Do I have you, Micah?" "Really?" "Of course you do." "For how long? Until you get bored? Until your job takes you to another city? Until you meet someone else who seems exciting and available?" "Evadne, why are you being like this? We won. We can be together now." "We didn't win anything. I lost my husband, my stepdaughter, my home, my family's respect, and most of my friends. What exactly did we win?" Micah looked confused and a little annoyed. "We won the right to be together without hiding." "That's not winning, Micah. That's just surviving the wreckage." I got in my car and drove away, leaving him standing in the courthouse parking lot. 6 months later, I was living in a small apartment across town, working at a new job where no one knew my story. Micah had moved on to another city and another woman. I saw the pictures on social media before I finally blocked him. I had tried to reach out to Sophie through Tom, but he had made it clear that until I could demonstrate genuine stability and growth, he wouldn't consider allowing me back into her life. I had started therapy, partly to deal with my guilt and regret, and partly because I hoped it might eventually help my case for visitation rights. My relationship with my family was slowly healing. My father had forgiven me, though he'd made it clear that he was disappointed in my choices. Evan spoke to me occasionally, usually just polite small talk. Marjorie would never forgive me, and I couldn't blame her. Lila and I had one conversation after the divorce was final. "I should have stopped you," she said. "I should have been a better friend, and told you how destructive your behavior was becoming." "It wasn't your job to stop me," I replied. "I made my choices." "Bad choices." "Yes, very bad choices." We haven't spoken since. Sometimes I drive by the house where Tom and Sophie live now. A different house, in a different neighborhood, far away from the memories we created together. I've seen them in the yard sometimes, playing catch or working in the garden, and they look happy, peaceful, like they've healed from the damage I caused. I destroyed my marriage for the illusion of excitement, for the fantasy of a more passionate life. I chose the temporary thrill of an affair over the steady love of a good man and the trust of an innocent child. I told myself I deserved to be happy, but I never stopped to consider what my happiness was costing the people who loved me. The divorce papers that once seemed like Tom's cruel overreaction now sit in my filing cabinet as a reminder of the consequences of my choices. Every signature, every legal phrase, every court order represents a moment when I chose my own selfish desires over my family's well-being. I thought I was the victim in this story, the misunderstood wife who just wanted to feel alive again. But I was never the victim. I was the architect of my own destruction, the author of my family's pain, and the sole person responsible for the wreckage I left behind. Tom took my betrayal seriously, because marriage is serious, love is serious, family is serious, and I learned too late that when you treat serious things as games, you lose everything that matters.